Hey, welcome to Storypower TV. I'm your host, J Loren Norris, and it is so great to be with you again. We are still on set remotely. We are not actually in the studio, but you are going to be so glad that you have watched this episode. You're probably going to want to go back and watch it again and share it with some people because you're going to learn about the three pillars of building a temple that is kingdom worthy. Building a temple that's kingdom worthy. Yeah, you're going to learn how to do that in this episode. Stay tuned. Hey, J Loren. Hey, J Loren Norris here. I am on this fresh set in a new place at a hidden location somewhere in Dallas. You might be able to tell if you can hear the background noise that we have jets flying over constantly. It's like a private airport, but not so private, but we're really close to it. But I'm in studio today with a young lady that I met from Florida, and she has lived a lifetime of experience at her very young age, but she's got a lot of wisdom to share with you. And I'm going to challenge you to listen closely and maybe even, you probably don't do this while you're watching TV very often, but grab a notepad. You're going to want to take notes. I promise you're going to want to take notes. Uh, but she's going to talk about the three pillars of building a temple that is kingdom worthy. You probably have never heard that phrase before, but you're going to want to know what Lindsey Parson has to say. So help me welcome nurse practitioner, kingdom builder, Lindsey Parson. Thank you.
Hello.
Appreciate you being here, Lindsey.
Thank you so much for having me.
So where in the world did you come up with the idea that there were three pillars of a temple that was praiseworthy, that was kingdom worthy?
Yeah. You've got the body, the soul, and the spirit.
Okay.
Those are the three pillars that really incorporate what it means to build not only your body, but your soul, which is your mind, will, and emotions, and then your spirit. This is one that sometimes people forget, especially in the world that we live in right now. And unfortunately, it was one that I wasn't really taking into account. And it really impacted my life. So I developed this notion when I realized something was missing. I had done the body, I had done the soul, but there was something missing.
Okay, now you say you've done the body. What do you mean by that? To what extent have you taken care of the body or built up the body? Because a lot of people say, well, we're all flesh and blood, so we know what the body is. But what do you know about the body that not everybody knows?
Yeah, a couple of things. I am an NPC, nationally qualified bikini competitor. So I have been on stage. I have won trophies.
There was a bikini competition. Sorry.
So it is nationally recognized. Okay. And so I have been on stage. I have built my body to this form that was trophy worthy. Wow. So hours upon hours in the gym. So firsthand knowledge of how to do that. I am a certified personal trainer. So going through that journey, I really wanted to know the why and the how behind building these muscles.
Right.
And then I'm a nurse practitioner. And so I have this background of how the body actually functions.
So not just from a physique standpoint, but from an anatomy, from a skeletal, from a metabolism, metabolic, hormone relationship, all of it.
All of that, right.
And then what does that have to do with the soul? What's the relationship between the body and the soul?
Yeah. Have you ever gone to the kitchen to pull out some cookies, but you really weren't hungry?
Yeah, usually when I'm falling asleep.
Okay. Maybe when you're falling asleep, maybe when you've had a stressful day, maybe when you just had a fight with your wife or you've had some bad news.
Right.
Okay. That is the connection between the body and the soul. These emotions, these attitudes that we take on,
right,
they can impact that food choice, that not wanting to drink your water, being tired, mentally, physically exhausted, and choosing that will, you choose not to go to the gym and do the things that you need to do, are good for your body, but that mind, will, and emotions, you just don't do it.
So what is it about the mind that would corrupt the body? I mean, that doesn't make sense. It almost seems like self-destructive.
Right. It does seem self-destructive, doesn't it?
So why do we do it?
We do it because we haven't been taught how to stay positive, or in some arenas there's some toxic positivity, but we have this mm, well, there are a few things.
If you looked at the culture of America, I think it was Dr. Caroline Leaf, who's a neuroscientist, not a dietitian, but she said we have what we call what she calls the MAD diet, the modern American diet,
Mm-hmm.
and it consists of so much sugar, so many carbohydrates, so little valuable protein. There's so many things. I mean, it used to be if you ate an apple a day, you keep the doctor away, but that was
Yes.
based on the nutrients the apple
Yes.
had. And today, that you
Yeah.
might as well eat a bath sponge. It has about the same amount of nutrients in it.
Yeah. So there is also the medical community.
Mm-hmm.
We look at things from a disease management perspective. And most people in our society, we look at medicine and we look at this prestige. And so we follow these ways that are really, we don't teach optimal health. We don't teach the nutrition.
Right.
We put a Band-Aid on things with a medication. And so not only do we not teach the nutrition, but we don't teach about how this mindset, this attitude can shift you into cravings. And then the cravings, in turn, biochemically cause a reaction in your body. And it's this vicious cycle of sugar and of inflammation and a crash.
My daughter has little boys, and she, in the last couple of years, completely removed sugar from the house, completely removed red dye number 2 from the house. Anything that has colors and dyes and stuff in it, she's like, we don't need that in our house. So backs off of grains, change the nut oils and stuff that they cook with. And I'm looking at some of that stuff going, is there a place where you're going overboard? I mean, changing their diet, does that really make a difference? But then I heard Dr. Gary Brecka say, I think his big rant was, we send these kids to school and we drug them because they have quote unquote ADHD or ADD and they won't behave in the classroom. He said, but there's nothing about ADD medically that makes it look like it is an Adderall deficiency. But it does look like there's an overdose of folic acid, which is what's found in most morning breakfast cereals. And so they say, this is a big meal a day. You need to eat it. And then you gorge yourself and you go to school and you fall asleep because you had a sugar rush and a folic acid intake. And now your brain doesn't work right. And now you're sitting in class bored stiff. And you either want to get up and move around or go to sleep.
Right.
And he said, now we add medicine to their life
Mm-hmm.
to try to fix that. So would you agree that the opposite of disease management would be disease prevention? Like, let's keep it from getting to our bodies in the beginning?
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And that is where I've made this shift to really wanting to empower people to see the necessity of using food as medicine and completely overhauling our, it's hard because people hear that you have to completely overhaul your diet.
Right.
To be able to make
diet,
it. Yeah,
diet,
exactly.
Atkins diet.
Right.
What's it? Keto. What is some of the, I mean, there's like 1,000 different ones that are out there, and you're like, it's the paleo diet. And you're like, what does that mean? We only eat old things? I don't understand.
So there's a lot of information and it's very confusing. And then it's all overwhelming. So when you hear,
Right.
I've got to completely change my diet to be able to be healthier or live this disease prevention type of way, people just stop because it feels like it's too hard.
It's too many decisions to make.
Too many
I just want to make
decisions.
one.
Right. And so the number one thing is to limit that information intake, that overwhelm of which diet do I do?
Right.
So looking at, you can do a few key things that will start making a huge change. Sugar.
Right.
Simple sugars. And you don't think about donuts in the morning for breakfast, cereal in the morning for breakfast. We're starting out our kids behind the 8 ball for 2 reasons. They get the sugar crash up and down, But it also is one of the main reasons that we end up with insulin resistance,
Right.
because this insulin level is up all of the time. And so then it impacts their behavior, and then they can't think straight. And then making good choices
Becomes even harder.
becomes even harder. And then it throws off your hormones. So insulin, cortisol, thyroid, they're all thrown off when you start with that sugar in the morning.
Wow. You know, a glass of orange juice, a bowl of cereal, some oatmeal with cinnamon in it.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no protein there.
And it's all, we didn't come up with these concepts because that's what grandma and grandpa did and it worked well.
Right.
We came with these concepts because the Mad Men of Madison Avenue said, here's a good way to sell
Yes.
what nobody's been able to buy.
It's also convenient.
Convenience, yeah.
It's also very
It's a lot easier to
convenient.
throw a Pop-Tart in the toaster than to make breakfast with bacon
Yeah.
and eggs every day.
And more women working,
Right.
kids coming home after school and they're home by
Latchkey
themselves.
kids, they love Twinkies.
Absolutely. It's easy to grab and go. You fill the cabinet with these foods that are put on the shelves that are said safe, and the marketing.
Yeah.
So you think that they're healthy, and it's just confusing.
Oh, and some of them, they don't even pretend to be health food per se, but they would never label them with the destructive capacity they have.
Right.
I mean, if you told somebody you could leave a Twinkie on the dash of your car for 22 years
Mhm.
and it will look, smell, and taste exactly the same.
Yep.
Okay, there's nothing food about that.
Right.
That's a sponge with stuff in it.
Right.
That's got just enough sugar to make you eat a sponge.
Yep.
But apparently, if you put enough sugar on anything, it'll work. But the effects that it has on your brain, if I'm not mistaken now, and you're the doctor, closer to a doctor than I am, they now say that dementia,
Type 3 diabetes.
type 3 diabetes, is directly related to the insulin resistance
Uh-huh.
and the amount of sugar in the body.
Absolutely is.
So when we start talking about the mind, are those mental choices or are those mental after effects, like the debris that's in the brain from the cortisol, from the other hormones that are being released? I love the way Dr. Leaf says, when we switched from task to task to task, it's easy to say I'm multitasking.
Mhm.
She said, well, that's fine as far as you're thinking of the strategic and tactical thinking of the task, but sometimes that task has an emotional attachment.
Right.
And so when you're moving from emotional attachment to emotional attachment to emotional attachment, you're releasing this kind of hormone, then this kind of hormone, then this kind. Now you get this hormonal milkshake going on in your head, and that actually has a biochemical destructive nature within it. So which is first, the chicken or the egg, the thought or the diet habits, or are they one and the same? Are they interchangeable? What's the origin versus the cause and effect?
That's a really good question. It's a really good question, because unless you grow up with no toxic exposure, how do you know?
So you'd have to be born on an island in the middle of nowhere eating nothing but veggies
Right. You need to live in a blue
that have
zone.
never been sprayed
Right.
with pesticides.
Exactly. So
We're just now finding out, there are vaccinations that have created significant mental and health issues. There are toxins in everything from what we wash our veggies with
Right.
to make them safe is more toxic than what the fluoride, the chlorine, some of that stuff is more toxic than what we had in the first place.
Right. There is a portion of, you still have choice, even though you have these chemicals that impact it and it makes your decisions harder.
Right.
There is still choice. It requires more discipline,
Right.
requires more hard work. But anyone who has hustled and grinded their way through any competition, any job interview, I mean, you can will your way through, but it makes it harder when you don't have.
Now, when you talk about the level of competition that you've competed at a national level, and you've got some trophies and awards in that capacity, that's not just did you spend enough time in the gym? Because as a mom,
Yeah.
as a wife, as an employee, the gym is kind of a luxury for some people, right? To be able to say, I went to the gym long enough just to keep the belly fat off, or long enough just to be able to stay in cardio shape so I can walk up the stairs without collapsing. For many people, that amount of time in the gym is hard enough.
Mhm.
So how did you carve out time to be a parent and a spouse and an employee and a gym rat enough to compete at a national level? That takes some serious mental discipline. How did you pull that off?
Something had to sacrifice.
What did you trade?
I traded the relationships in my home, my husband, and my kids.
Wow.
I competed in the last competition in 2020, and we know what was going on in 2020.
Yeah.
And as a nurse practitioner in the emergency department and in a testing facility, worked long hours, long days.
And went from there to the gym.
Went from gym to there to gym.
Wow. And you're still married.
I am still married by the grace of God.
So during this season, you're obviously you've already worked on your education. You're now working on your body.
Yeah.
What are you doing to keep your mind fit during that season? What kind of things were you doing for yourself to keep thinking clear, thinking straight?
I did a really poor job in that season of keeping my mind in a good place. I really was in a distraction. I kept myself distracted from not having to deal with the emotions,
Okay.
not having to deal with the relationships.
Because it's probably obvious to you from a relational and a mental and a memory and a cognizant, it's obvious to you that things are not going right at home.
Right.
It's obvious when you're not communicating well with your kids.
Yeah.
It's obvious when even at work, there's the tensions are there in the relationships. And that doesn't usually make one happy.
Right.
That usually, just the awareness of those things usually makes you a little defensive, a little bitter, a little edgy, a little frustrated.
Yeah.
On top of all that.
Yeah. Well, this was another big piece of the 3 pillars.
Okay.
Because I was really focused on the body.
Right.
And that was pretty much it. Because everything else took a back seat. And I worked on diet and nutrition and hydration and workout. And I had to go to work to provide. But that distraction. And so when I stepped on stage and won all of these trophies and was told by judges that I had attained this perfect body that I had been working for 25 years, it did not feel like what I thought it should feel like.
There was no win there.
There was absolutely no win. I did not want to talk about it after it was done.
Really?
I didn't want to celebrate with anyone.
And did your family just run around you with pom-poms and cheerleading? And
oh yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to shut it down and be done.
Why?
Because I had completely neglected the mind and emotions.
So how did you come to the awareness that I've succeeded to this level? Because there were a lot of people who would say, whether it's in competition bodybuilding or it's in whatever other competitive nature they are, competitive sports, competitive academics, competitive politics, when I get the win, when I close the deal, when I sign the contract, when I get to that space, all the world will be right. There are a lot of people that are firmly convinced that, yes, I'm making emotional, financial sacrifices now, but there's going to be a payoff. I'm involved in this MLM, or I'm involved in this organization, or I'm involved in this new venture. And I know when I hit this checkpoint, it's going to be all good. That Dr. John Maxwell calls that the destination disease.
Yeah, I had that for sure.
I'm going to get there. And when I get there, I'll be happy. When I get there, life will be perfect. When I get there, it's all good.
Yeah.
But you got there.
I got there with lots of things.
And it wasn't all good.
It was not all good. That's when I knew there's got to be something more to this thing called life.
And was there like an epiphany moment, an aha moment, and you went, dang, I wasted all of that?
Yes. But it wasn't immediate.
What do you mean by that? A slow revelation? Or it was a revelation that you didn't really understand was a revelation when you got it? Okay.
It was a revelation that I did not understand when I got it. It was that there's got to be more than this, but I didn't quite know what that was yet. And it took a couple more years to unfold.
What is the more?
The more is finding Jesus.
Okay.
The spirit piece. That 3rd pillar.
Okay. So you worked on the body. You worked on the mind, the will, and the emotions, the soul.
Yeah.
To some extent.
To some extent.
And then you had a spiritual discovery.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
That came about because my husband, who is an amazing, faithful man of God, who had been our whole marriage, but I had not. And this was another one of those things we just didn't communicate about. We didn't talk about it. We just swept it under the rug like a whole lot of other things. And we had a really tough season in our marriage. And at one point, I had divorce papers on my desk.
Wow.
And I tried, I asked him multiple times to leave, and he would not. And for all of the ups and downs of our marriage, he afforded me this grace that I didn't understand until I lived through this season of understanding what it is to tell someone, I forgive you for all of this mess, even though you don't deserve it, but I love you and I'm extending this. And at that moment, I saw Christ living through my husband, even though I didn't know Christ. I didn't know this God, this Jesus. But at that moment, I did, because I saw him living through my husband when he said, I forgive you for all of this mess, for this selfishness,
Yeah.
for this being distracted from our family, for choosing things outside the home
That were more important.
that were more important.
Priorities out of order.
They were very out of order.
It's amazing too, because scripture says that love covers a multitude of sins. And we forget sometimes that love and grace are interchangeable words because they're both the personality of an almighty God.
Yeah.
I love when the paralyzed man was delivered by his 4 friends, and they dug a hole in the roof and they dropped him. And Jesus looked at him and said, I forgive you. And everybody's like, wait, what? I mean, didn't you mean you're healed? Didn't you mean you've been made whole? He said, no, I forgive you. They're the same thing.
Yeah.
Because when I forgive you, you're made whole.
Yeah.
It means that all of the burden is released. It's all done. It's all covered. That I got it. I'm taking this. I'm taking away the sins of the world.
Yeah.
And it's hard until we see that. It's hard to explain it.
Right.
It's hard theologically to grasp it, but it is an integral part. Now, I know you mentioned, I've heard you talk about this forgiveness moment, but in contrast to you said earlier, we eat our emotions. You know, we kind of have this attitude problem when it comes to food, and so we let those bad moods come in there. Where does this forgiveness and grace fit with an attitude that causes me to eat too many donuts? How does that all work together?
There comes a point where the discipline required, the hard work required, the accountability that you need to make the choices, to work on the body, to do the things that you know are the right things, that you can't do it yourself. That you really have to surrender. You have to surrender control. You have to surrender and give this control of all of the worldly things that you feel like are so important. All of the things that you feel like are going to make this life perfect. You have to give that to God and let him take control, because we can't do it on our own.
Right.
We cannot do it on our own.
Now, there are a lot of people who would say, my mind would be much better off if I didn't look in the mirror and not like what I'm seeing. And I can't believe that God would put me in the place where he says he's a loving God, but he's treated me like this. How can that possibly be true? And yet half of what we're holding on to, it was my story for many years, was I couldn't forgive me for the stupid things that I had done. And so it was almost like a subconscious self-sabotage.
Mhm.
I was okay with doing all the things that I knew was going to bring about destruction because I feel like subconsciously I deserve it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was reaching the place where I understand that the grace of God says, I see you, all your stupidity, and I raise you grace.
Yeah.
I get it all. You're not hiding anything from me. I'm not shocked or surprised by it. Disappointed and heartbroken, maybe. Not shocked and surprised.
Yeah.
And so grace begins to cover all that. As a certified personal trainer, as a nurse, as a coach, do you help people kind of walk through this journey?
Yeah.
And how would they reach you if they wanted to do that?
So my website is princesswarriorwellness.com.
princesswarriorwellness.com.
Yeah.
So do you focus mostly with women?
I do. I
Okay.
do. I really have a passion to empower women. I know that there are men who are out there that need the help.
Yeah.
There are other men out there to help them. I really focus on women because my story, my background, my passion, my calling is to help these women who I used to be.
Excellent. Princess Warrior
Wellness.
princesswarriorwellness.com.
Yeah.
If you were speaking to that mom who has overwhelmed herself with trying to stay fit, trying to be pretty, trying to be the perfect housewife, the perfect employee, the perfect mom, all at the same time, and it just isn't working. Let's just speak right to the camera for a minute and tell them what you would say to them.
I would say to take a second and look at what's working and what's not. And if you're questioning, is this all there is to life? Maybe you're in diapers. Maybe your kids are about to start middle school. Maybe they're graduating high school and you just still feel like, what am I doing? You're overwhelmed with corporate role. Maybe you're still staying at home. Maybe you found Jesus. And if you have, that's awesome. But are you connected? Are you doing the right things to get connected, to surrender control, to let him take your hand and lead you down the path to freedom? And if you haven't, if you don't know Jesus, maybe, just maybe, there's something different out there. Because I can tell you for a really long time that I don't need anybody else. I can do it on my own. I have control of my own destiny. For 39 years, I said that. And even if you have doubts, it's got to be better than where you are now. It's where I was. So what do you have to lose? You can try it. If it doesn't work, you can come talk to me and I'll help you through the journey. But it will.
Lindsey, I appreciate you taking time to come by today.
Thank you for having me.
If you're struggling in that place and you're asking yourself, is there more to this life? Could I do something better? If you fought with the mirror and the battle of the bulge and the belt and the sleeplessness and the frustration and the anger, and you're wondering, how in the world could I possibly fix this problem? I can't think straight. I can't rest straight. I can't get anything right in my life. My relationships are a mess. Maybe the work you've been doing on the body and maybe the work you've been doing on the mind is, well, it's never going to be enough, because it can't. It can't fix the problem until you get right with the Holy One. I encourage you to take some time. Visit Princess Warrior Wellness and just drop a line to Lindsey and say, hey, I need some help. Maybe she can help with your diet. Maybe she can help with your thought process, but she can surely introduce you to Christ. And if you can't reach her, drop me a line. I'll be glad to help. I'm J Loren Norris for Storypower TV, for Tell It Like It Is. Have a blessed day.
recommend taking J Loren's Storypower Masterclass. It was amazing. I took away so much information. One of the things that I really enjoyed being formally trained in media many years ago is the call to action. I will use that with every speaking engagement, and I'm so grateful that Loren just spoke truth into his teachings, and he is a true professional. And I know this might sound weird, but I've been taking certifications in different classes over the years, and Loren is not boring. I can't even believe I got here at 9, and then the class went by so fast that I was like, it's time to go already? And I was shocked that it was time to go already. So it's an awesome class. You're going to enjoy it, I promise.